Ghostly tales, yet mirrors of human life. Hey everyone! Welcome to Encountering Chinese. Ghostly Tales from Zhai. Today, I'm going to tell you a story called Taotie. In Zhizhou, there was a man named Shen, a renowned outlaw in the Greenwood. He possessed great strength, could wield a powerful bow, and was skilled in rapid-fire archery, showcasing his unparalleled martial arts. Despite his exceptional abilities, Shen led a destitute life, lacking business acumen and often losing all his capital in trade ventures. Large merchants from Nanjing and Beijing were willing to accompany Shen on his journeys, seeking the assurance of safety during travels. Once, during the early winter, 2 or 3 merchants offered to lend Shen some capital, inviting him to do business together. Shen pooled together all his savings, borrowed additional money, and prepared to purchase a large quantity of goods. Shen had a friend skilled in divination, and before setting out, he consulted him to predict the fortune. After casting the divination, the friend told him, "This hexagram is called regret, indicating that you will encounter difficulties. Not only will you fail to make money in this business, but you will also lose the capital." Upon hearing this, Shen felt gloomy and contemplated abandoning the business. However, his merchant friends persistently urged and even forced him to join them in the trade. When they arrived in the capital city, the friends' divination proved accurate, and Shen lost his capital. One day in mid-December, Shen mounted his horse and left through the city gate. The thought of not having capital for business in the coming year weighed heavily on his mind, deepening his sense of gloom. At that time, with the morning mist lingering, Shen decided to take a break and have some wine at a small roadside inn. In the inn, there was an elderly man with graying hair and 2 young men, seated by the northern window, enjoying their drinks. A servant with disheveled blonde hair stood by, serving them. Shen took a seat on the southern side, directly facing the old man. At this moment, the servant accidentally spilled the wine, staining the old man's clothes. One of the young men, furious, immediately grabbed the servant's ear and instructed him to use a handkerchief to clean the stain from the old man's clothes. Shen also noticed that the servant, responsible for the mishap, had iron arrowheads on his fingers, each about ½ an inch thick and weighing about 2 taels. After the meal, the old man ordered the young men to take out silver coins, stacking them on the dining table. While the young men weighed the silver, they counted using their fingers. It took a few minutes for them to wrap and seal all the silver again. Then, one of the young men led out a limping black mule from the stable, assisted the old man in mounting, and the servant mounted a thin horse. The 2 young men, with arrows at their waists, led the horses and rode out of the inn. Witnessing their considerable wealth, Shen stared with intense greed, putting down his wine glass and quickly following them. Upon seeing the old man and his servant slowly advancing ahead, Shen left the main road and took a shortcut, rushing diagonally towards the old man. He drew his bowstring taut, glaring angrily at the old man. The old man bent down, removed the boot from his left foot, and smiled at Shen, saying, "Don't you recognize me, Taotie? Ignoring the Taotie, Xingde forcefully pulled the bowstring, releasing the arrow towards him. The Taotie reclined on the saddle, extended his left foot, and spread 2 toes, gripping the incoming arrow like a pair of pliers. With a smile, the Taotie remarked, "Is this all the skill you have? Is it even necessary for me, your old man, to personally intervene?" Infuriated, Xingde unleashed his signature skill, a rapid succession of arrows. The first arrow was just released when the second one followed suit. The Taotie reached out and caught the first arrow as if he hadn't anticipated that Xingde would shoot a second arrow. Meanwhile, the second arrow directly pierced into the Taotie's mouth. He abruptly fell, tumbled off the horse, and lay motionless on the ground with the arrowhead clenched in his mouth. The servant dismounted as well. Xingde, thinking the Taotie had been fatally shot, approached him slowly. Suddenly, the seemingly lifeless Taotie sprang to his feet, spat out the arrow, and clapped his hands, saying, "Nice to meet you for the first time. Why play such a big joke on me?" Astonished, Xingde was taken aback, and his steed galloped away in fright. Only then did Xingde realize that the Taotie was no ordinary person, and he dared not attempt to rob him of his belongings again. Xingde rode on for another 30 or 40 miles and encountered a steward of a local official who was leading a large amount of property to Beijing. Xingde intercepted him, seized the property, which he estimated to be worth about 1,000 taels of silver, and felt somewhat relieved. Just as he was about to set off again, he suddenly heard the sound of hoofbeats in the distance. Turning around, he saw the servant who had been following the Taotie approaching. The servant, riding the lame mule, berated Xingde, saying, "Stop right there. You should share some of the goods you looted just now with us." Xingde said, "Do you know who I am, Xingde with the rapid-fire arrows?" The servant replied, "We've just witnessed your martial skills." Xingde, seeing that the servant didn't look particularly formidable and wasn't carrying a bow and arrows, thought he could easily deal with him. So, he raised his bow and shot 3 arrows in quick succession, like a group of eagles in flight. The servant, unruffled, caught each arrow in both hands and even held one in his mouth, smiling as he said to Xingde, "You have such a meager skill, it's really laughable. I was in a hurry today and didn't have time to find a bow. These arrows are useless to me, so I'll return them to you." With that, he took off the iron arrowheads from his fingers, strung them together, and then threw them with force. Xingde only heard a whistling sound near his ears. He hastily used the bow to deflect the flying arrows, but the bowstring struck the iron arrowheads with a clang sound, and the bowstring snapped, the bow cracking into pieces. Stunned by the servant's incredible skill, Xingde hadn't even had time to dodge when the arrows pierced his ears, and he was suddenly knocked off his horse. The servant dismounted and was about to search for money and valuables on Xingde when he, lying on the ground, fiercely fought back with the broken bow. The servant snatched the bow from Xingde, snapped it in half, then into quarters, and finally threw it on the ground. Next, the servant seized Xingde's arms, pinned his legs with his feet, and Xingde felt as if his arms were bound by ropes and his legs were crushed by a heavy weight, rendering him unable to move. Xingde had a double-layered leather belt around his waist, 3 fingers wide. The servant pinched it lightly, and the belt broke apart like ashes. The servant took out the valuables from Xingde's body, then leaped onto the horse, raised his hand in acknowledgement, and said, "I've offended you," before disappearing into the distance. Having gone through this experience, Xingde returned to his hometown. After returning home, he underwent a complete change in character and finally became a person of good conduct, adhering to the law and propriety. He often openly shared this past experience with others. His story was similar to the one Lu Dongshan told me. Today's story is about a Taotie, a mythical creature that assumed the guise of an elderly man. In ancient Chinese mythology, the Taotie represents a fierce and greedy beast among the 4 malevolent entities from ancient times. Described in the Classic of Mountains and Seas, this creature features a sheep-like body, a human face, tiger-like teeth, and eyes under its armpits, emitting cries akin to a newborn's wail. Symbolizing both ferocity and insatiable greed, the Taotie's origins trace back to pre-Qin texts, with its ominous visage found in artifacts across China. Alright. That's all for today's ghostly tale. Taotie. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Please also encourage everyone to comment and share more. We'll see you in the next episode.